Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming to our Crisis to Hope event tonight. This is so great of you guys to make it out on such a wintry and nasty night. This event is, my name is Sarah Majoris. I am a Common Ground Crisis Line volunteer. I've lived in Farmington my whole life, and I'm a member of Farmington SAFE, which is Farmington Suicide Awareness for Everyone. So this is a special event for me because of all those three circles that I just mentioned. Those are like my best three circles of my life. My first circle is Farmington, where I've lived my whole life. I'm really fortunate to have lived in this city and to have raised my three boys in such a great town. My brothers and I graduated from North Farmington in 1980, 83, and 87. There's a couple of 83 grads here in the mix, all right? Free in 83. I think if we would have had events like this for our teachers, staff, and students during our time of growing up, things might have worked out differently for many of us who were dealing with different types of crises that we were too ashamed to share. We grew up in a time of sweeping problems under the rug. My second circle is Common Ground, where I got involved in 2011. I started volunteering on the crisis line that year. It's been the best. I'm super fortunate to be involved in such a supportive, helpful, hopeful organization, and it's helped me turn a tragic family experience into something very positive and empowering. And my third circle is the Farmington SAFE group that we also started in 2011, and I'm really happy that my city is addressing this issue of suicide awareness because it's an important topic. I'm happy that we can talk about it. That's our theme. That's our little logo for our group. And it's important to spread awareness and to remove that stigma, and I think that's what we're doing tonight, and I think that's what we're doing with our group, because we're a community who cares, right? All right, so before I hand this over to wonderful Reggie Harrison, or to wonderful Tony Rothschild, sorry, I have one little bit of homework for you to do tonight. If everybody could put our crisis line number in your phones. It's 1-800-231-1127. You don't have to do it right now, but sometime tonight or sometime tomorrow, put it in your phones, keep it with you. You never know when you or someone you love might need support. So that's my little homework assignment for you tonight. So thank you again for coming, and here is Tony Rothschild, the CEO of Common Ground.
Thank you, Sarah. You know, you're applauding her, not me, believe me. And I applaud Sarah. I work for 23 and a half years now at, I think, one of the greatest human service agencies, certainly in the Detroit area, if not the country. And we do such great work and interesting work. And I think one of the reasons we're so good is because, and I want Joanna and Jack to listen to this, it's because of your daughter, Sarah, because when you come to volunteer and you bring that passion with you, and a lot of our staff and volunteers all bring that same passion, you just do good work because people really care, and that comes out. And so it gives me a lot of pride to be, and keeps me at Common Ground for so many years that I've been there and seen it grow. And so we really appreciate your efforts, Sarah, and others like you. We have a lot of volunteers. And we also love the Farmington SAFE group. There's a few strong groups in Oakland County, but you can count them on one hand, and so I applaud you for the work you do here. And Ken, I guess you started it, and we appreciate that. So I want to talk a little bit about one area of passion for my work at Common Ground, and I got my little prop here, and it's two things, which it's a pill bottle, and it's this piece of Dacron here, see? That's a Dacron tube. This was a very similar thing, was put in my father's, replaced his aorta back in 1962 or 3. He went to Houston. I grew up in California. He flew down to Houston, Texas, was operated on by who later became a renowned heart surgeon, Michael DeBakey, who just died a couple of years ago at 99. And he had this operation because of these vascular problems he was having. And when he came back from Houston and recovered, he carried this thing all the time. And he would always show people this wherever he went. I had this operation, look what I got inside of me, wherever it goes. And, he kept it all his life. This is a pill bottle. So in 1969, when I was away at college, he took an overdose of sleeping pills to kill himself and ended up in the hospital. And we rushed to the hospital, and the good news then was that he was okay. He came out of it. He was okay. The family, I shouldn't be divulging my age. I was 21 at the time. We were shocked. I mean, just dismayed that anything like this could. We didn't even know what a sign was back then about suicide, but we certainly didn't see any. And we had a conversation at the dinner table a week later when he got out of the hospital. And he basically just said, I did something stupid and I'm not going to do it again. And that was the whole conversation. And that was a big relief for me. Even though I was in college, I just didn't want to deal with, our family dinner and discussions were always about what are we doing, who are we dating, sports, nothing to do about, depression, anxiety, and serious issues of what pressures or stresses my father was under, and not having to talk about it was a big relief. So 1985, I was in Detroit by then and had my family, and this time my father tried again to take his life, and he was successful. He killed himself in Las Vegas. He went in the garage and turned the car on with carbon monoxide poisoning. One of the things I wanted to say about this pill bottle, he never took the pill bottle around when he got out of the hospital. He took the Dacron vein, but never the pill bottle to say, oh, look what happened to me, and didn't talk about it. So I come to Common Ground in 1990. We were a small crisis center serving, at that time, about 15,000. Today, we serve over 65,000 people a year. I came for the job as a social worker. It was a career move for me. I didn't think about my father's suicide at the time, that I was working in an agency that 24 hours a day dealt with calls and crisis calls and did suicide intervention and prevention. I just didn't put it to my life. And not until just, believe it or not, 3 or 4 years ago did I start really processing what happened to my father and what happened to me in that process. And I've learned a lot at Common Ground. I've been through the trainings, I go to conferences. Now I know a lot of stuff that I didn't know when I was 21. And there's 2 lessons that I take looking back. The first one is that my father obviously was feeling emotional pain. That's why somebody tries to kill themselves, because they don't know how to end the pain. And he didn't tell anybody about it. He couldn't talk about it. And why is that? Because as a society, there's a lot of stigma about mental illness, and people are afraid to divulge how they're feeling. They don't feel safe. Second thing is, after his first suicide attempt to 1985, I never had one discussion with him, and neither did anybody else in my family, after that night that he said he did something stupid and wouldn't do it again. Well, I have some tools now. If I had those tools then, there would have been a lot of conversation. And perhaps, and I'd like to think, the outcome would have been different. So just looking back at my career at Common Ground, it gives me like, well, this is what I've been passionate about. It's not just a career move. It's about helping to change people's lives and society so that these kinds of things don't happen again. Now, Cheryl Rossman's going to get up in a minute and talk to you a little bit about all the programs we do. So I'm going to skip over that part and talk about the vision we have for Common Ground, because I think this is really our purpose at Common Ground. We have 3 things we need to do as a human service agency. One is we have to grow. We're coming into a new world with healthcare reform and everything like that, that small little agencies are going to have trouble struggling and surviving. And we have to grow as an agency and collaborate and work with other groups and get stronger so we can continue our mission of helping people move from crisis to hope. The second thing we need to do is we need to make sure that nobody in this country dies because they don't feel safe telling how they feel and what's wrong with them. And that's something we can prevent. We know we can because we prevent it. But there's certain people that Common Ground can help, because if they don't call us, they don't come to us, we don't do a good job. It's when they come to us that we can do an effective job. So we as a society have to do a better job at helping people to feel safe asking for help when it's a problem dealing with a mental illness. And one of the ways we're doing that is with mental health first aid, a program that's like Red Cross first aid, but it's for the layperson. It's an 8-hour training, and until October, all the classes are free because of our state passed they actually got together and passed a bill giving a lot of money to provide mental health first aid in the urban areas of Michigan. And you'll hear more about that later, but this is a vision for us that in the next 5 years we want to see over 10,000 people in Oakland County trained in mental health first aid. That gives a layperson, like I was back in 1969, simple tools to engage somebody that you learn about mental illness, you learn about stigma, and it helps you to feel comfortable engaging that person to connect them to help if they need it. And it's not that difficult, but it's something that I never had, and that's why a lot of us never say anything. We just want it to go away. So that's an important thing. And the last thing is we have a vision 5 years for our own programs so that when people are at Common Ground, that we can be more effective at helping them to feel safe to talk about the traumas they've had in their life and what's going on. And that's what we call the expressive arts. We have art therapy, and you'll hear about that a little bit, in one of our programs, our crisis residential unit for mentally ill adults. They stay up to 10 days, and we have trained art therapists, and they do art therapy. And that helps people express themselves when the words aren't coming out. They can do it with drawings and pictures with trained help. Well, we can't afford that in all our other programs. And we know if we had 2 more art therapists, an art therapist champion, we could put this program and all our programs, our youth programs, our youth residential program, the Sanctuary and Step Forward, even in our emergency crisis center, if we could do that, we could reach another 1,500 people a year, and we would have even better results than we have now. So the Common Ground's going for growth. It's going to train people and give people the tools to engage people that might be having a mental health crisis and connect them to help, and we're going to work on our own internal programs to make them better and more effective. Now to hear what all these programs are, I'm going to invite Cheryl Rossman up, our Director of Director of Advancement. Advancement, because we never go backwards, we always go forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cheryl. I am Director of Advancement for Common Ground. And I'm so glad that, Sarah, you helped put this together and that you all came out here this evening to find out more about Common Ground. Common Ground is one of the most unique agencies you'll ever run across in your lifetime. We have a model, we have a building, we have a vision, and we're leading the nation right now in how people look at mental health, how people perceive mental health, and crisis intervention agency using technology for crisis intervention agency or crisis intervention tools. For instance, our task text and chat line. So first of all, Tony's too modest. He didn't bring those things up. But we're a progressive agency. We've grown a lot through the leadership of Tony Rothschild, and we're leading the nation with our model. So we do hope to expand. All of our programs, I'm not going to tell you about all of our programs. If I did, you'd get bored and you wouldn't retain that information anyway. I'm just going to give you some bullets. The first thing, don't leave without one of these. This will outline all of our programs. We have 3 different impact areas. Common Ground provides response to crisis, provides safety and advocacy, and builds communities of support. That's the essence of what we do. What we would like you to take away this evening is the essence of our work, to get the feeling of what we do. to understand that our agency better, so when you're out in the community, you can be an ambassador or a spokesperson for Common Ground. On your seats, there's fact sheets. Take that home with you. Take a look at it, and then the cards that you were asked to fill out, please make sure you return those. One of the things tonight, when we start bringing the speakers up, you're going to get a lot of information, and it's going to take a while to process that. And Reggie or myself will be calling you in a couple of days. Write the questions down, be ready for us, and we'd be happy to talk to you more about whatever hit you tonight, whatever you want to know more about from tonight. All around the room is more information about Common Ground, so welcome to walk around and experience some of the brochures and things we have. But right now, all we want is your attention and in your ears to listen to our story. Our first story is going to be about responding to crisis. Most of our psychiatric and emergency intake revolve around responding to crisis. We run the 800 crisis telephone line for Oakland County. We're the gateway to mental health for Oakland County, but we do receive texts and phone calls from all over the nation, but generally this region. One of the things about the United States of America, one of a cultural thing, is that we really believe that each day is going to be much the same. Today will be much like yesterday, and tomorrow is going to be much like today. The truth is, crisis can happen at any time. Last Wednesday, when I got home from work and I was tired and thought I was going to do homework, my roommate came home and said that her 15-year-old daughter found her dad dead that morning. His feet were purple. She thought they were dirty. She wondered why Dad got up in the middle of the night to walk in the garage and get his feet dirty. I called the crisis telephone line. And so I'm encouraging everyone. Every day isn't the same. Crisis is an equal opportunity. It can happen at any time. And it's good, Sarah told you to put that number in. It's your number one tool. So the person who I reached on the crisis telephone line was Amelia, and she's going to share one of the stories, a story about one day when a family that we were working with, life changed completely. Amelia?
Thank you, Cheryl. As Cheryl said, I'm Amelia Lehto. I'm a crisis line coordinator and suicide prevention specialist at Common Ground. I also brought a handout. It's the Parent Suicide Prevention Toolkit. You're welcome to take it and share it with your friends. We're really proud of it. But this is about a day 4 years ago when I didn't know what to expect that day. I didn't know whose life was going to change, but I knew I had to go into work. I work the 8 to 12 crisis line shift in the morning with my wonderful dedicated volunteers that have been there upwards of 30 years. And I got my son dressed that day. I packed myself some good healthy eats. I was pregnant at the time with my youngest, and I dropped him off to school, gave him his backpack, kissed him goodbye, said I'll pick you up at 4 o'clock. Have a good day. And I went to work. Now I got to work. It was nearing the end of our shift, and my volunteer of 30 years answered the phone from a social worker at a local hospital. And they said, there's been a trauma, it's been a fatal car accident, we need you guys to come out, can you help us? And a few years before that, many of us went through international critical incident stress management training, where we can go out to the scene or after the scene of a fatal traumatic event and support those that have been involved. And we have a team, it's the crisis response team. So they called the right place that morning. We got a team together. I went out with my manager and our victim assistance manager and met them at the hospital. We thought we were going to be working with the staff, which we did, but the families were also involved. Now, that morning, Shay had packed her girls up, much like myself. She kissed them goodbye as she handed them off for a carpool and drove off to get to work herself. And little did she know, 10 minutes after, the driver hit a sheet of black ice. And there was one young woman who died on the scene, and Shay's daughters were brought back to the hospital along with the driver. Now, the doctors did everything they could, but those 2 young women lost their lives that day. And when we got there, they said, could you speak to the driver? I think she's in shock. She has some supports now. She was local to the area, and we went and talked with her for a few moments, introduced ourselves, and, said, we'll check back in with you later. And then they said Shay was on her way to the hospital. She'd been called, but she wasn't aware of what happened that morning. She had just been told there'd been an accident, you needed to come in, and she came in right away, as any mother would, expecting, something bad's gonna happen, but you're never prepared for the worst news of your life. Now, when Shay arrived, she was brought into a room. The hospital doctors and social worker talked to her, and I will never forget the screams of that poor woman when she was told that her daughters had died that morning. The doctors left and asked us if we wanted to join her, and we did. And my coworkers talked to the boyfriend that was with her at the time and her sister, and I sat down next to Shay, and I asked if I could hold her hand. And she said, yes, please. And I held her hand, and we sat there in silence for a few moments. She was processing what she had just heard. And I asked, do you need to make any calls? And she said, yes. Can you make those calls yourself? And shook her head. I asked if I could have her phone and who she wanted me to call. And she wanted me to call her aunt and her grandmother. And I made those calls to these 2 women. And I said, I'm with Shay. I looked at Shay, do you want me to tell them? She said, yes. I said, your 2 granddaughters have passed away this morning, and we need you to come to the hospital. And I called the aunt and shared the same news, and passed tissues to Shay as she cried, and couldn't, the boyfriend consoled her as much as he could at the time. And we sat there for what seemed like forever. The doctors finally came in and said, do you want to see your daughters? Do you want to say goodbye? And she said, yes. And we all stood up in unison and walked into the hall. I was on her right side, and her boyfriend was on her left side, and we walked down the hall that seemed like it went on forever, and we got to the door of the operating room that her girls were in, and I could feel her start to buckle. And I was pregnant myself at the time, so I knew that we needed to keep her up. We needed to keep her. The least thing that she did that day was she was going to keep breathing. She was going to make it through this day. And I caught her and helped her sit on a bed that was in the room, and stood before her and held her hands and mirrored my breathing. We just breathed for a few minutes. We were just there, getting ourselves together to say goodbye. And she said she was ready, and she stood up. Now, she was 6 months pregnant at the time as well, so I was keeping that in mind. And she said, okay, I want to see my daughters. And her daughters were laid out next to each other. They were very peaceful. They had these beautiful quilts that some volunteers had made, laid out on them, and they looked very restful. And I led her between the beds, and she said her final words to her young girls. And we stepped back and met with some of the staff. They had done their best to save these young women's lives. And we talked with them, and then we talked with some family members that as they started to arrive. And we had packets of information, and we did our diffusing, which is what we do, after the initial, event, to help them process and just get them through the night, because other children were in the family and they needed to be told as well. So we had some packets of information to how to speak to a child after a traumatic event. And we were there for about 6 hours that day. And we came back to the crisis center, and we debrief after every call. Debrief. You don't have to take this home. You can process this in a healthy way and know that you're not alone, you're supported. And what did you do well? And, what would you have wished that you could have said? And we did that for about an hour or so. And I left that day. And I thought I was good. And I get a mile down the road, and I just get hysterical. I just let myself go and cried and pulled over and called all of my sisters and my fiance at the time and said, I love you so much. Just, if you don't know anything else today, I love you. And it's just that hard reminder that you never know what your last words will be to someone. And I scared them all, and they all called each other, and they all called me back, and They made sure I was okay. And I said, I'm okay, just hard job. It was a hard day. And I got home after picking up my son, and we cuddled and just spent the rest of the evening together. And I was thankful for being able to come home to him, as Shay wasn't able to go to home to her girls. Now, 2 years ago, I was working my Monday morning shift regularly. I think it was last year, actually. And I get a call. And it's Shay on the other end of the line. I knew that because as, we do our model, she talked about how she lost her young daughters a couple years ago, and she got counseling for that, but she was going through some hard times again. And she knew that Common Ground was a place that she could get some help. And I was able to get her connected with some resources, and never crossed the line of saying, I'm so glad that you're okay, because she was entitled to her anonymity. But I knew that she was, and that was thankful for me, because we don't always see the full circle of what happens in someone's life after we meet them initially. So that was very thankful for me to experience. And I thank you so much for coming out tonight. And I want to introduce Reggie Harrison, who's going to share a little bit more about what we do. Thank you.
So Amelia is a great example of the passion that is on the other side of the phone when you call the crisis line. Knowledgeable, passionate, and there to help. And like she said, she could connect people to resources. When the people like Sarah that are on the phone with her, if they don't have an answer, or if we don't have a program, we have a plethora of resources that they can connect to. So there's always a connection to a service for them at the other end of the phone. So about 65,000 people a year call the crisis line. And a great thing about Common Ground is that we stay current and want to move ahead. So we've started the texting line, like Cheryl mentioned, and it's only been going for about 2 months, the crisis text line. And it's from 4 to 10. It's starting as a new model, but it's been going for 2 months. And in the 2 months that it's been going, we've had over 1,200 crisis interventions by text. So that's a lot. I think it's like 22 a day, which is amazing. So, we're trying to stay on the cutting edge of reaching out and getting people, because some people aren't going to pick up the phone, but they will text. So we're trying to stay with that. So our second impact area is providing safety and advocacy. So we all get to go home and be comfortable in our homes and know that there's some food in our refrigerator. And we take that for granted because we have safety there. And sometimes people don't have that safety or the comfort to be able to, the comfort that they need. So our next speaker is going to talk about coming to one of the Common Grounds places that it is a place where, well, I'm going to just let him take it from here. So here is Keith Arbanowski.
Hello. Are there any city employees here? Terry Arbanowski is my mother. You may know her. She just retired, doing great in Florida, so I thought I'd mention that while I'm here. Again, my name's Keith. I'm a Common Ground volunteer. I'm also a former client. I live with a form of bipolar disorder, and I first learned of Common Ground 6 years ago before I was properly diagnosed and treated. During that time, my symptoms were severe. I had cycles of depression that left me feeling absolutely hopeless. Often, I went to bed at night pleading not to wake up the next day. And on one especially difficult morning, out of desperation, I was taken to the hospital. Fortunately, a doctor suggested that I spend some time with Common Ground at Hendry, which is a crisis residential unit for adults in Royal Oak. I'd never heard of Common Ground and was shocked that such a resource exists. For 2 weeks, they housed me, fed me 3 times a day, and provided medication and therapy all free of charge. Clients pay nothing. And I think it's amazing that those resources are available to people in need without the stress and anxiety of money becoming part of the equation. Makes it easier to seek help when there's no price tag. When I arrived, I felt embarrassed. I felt ashamed of my condition because of the stigma that we've been talking about. But the clients and all the staff were waiting to welcome me. They shook my hand, they smiled, No one judged me like I feared, and I felt safe. And feeling safe was very important. I was accustomed to living with a great deal of fear and anxiety, and the environment felt nurturing. The panic that sent me to the hospital began to lift, and I was able to see myself and the details of my life more clearly. And that's where healing begins, when we take an honest look at ourselves and the changes that we need to make. Before my stay, there was very little order in my life. I spent most of my time and energy coping with my symptoms. But at Common Ground, some order was introduced. We had regular meal times, regular bedtime, scheduled activities, and therapy. These all sound like small things, but they were a dramatic shift from the chaos that I was accustomed to living with. One of our activities was art therapy. And I'm an artist, but I'd never done any work with a therapist. And I loved it. It was cathartic and revealing. I'm a firm believer in the healing potential of the creative process and its ability to reveal things that we're not necessarily conscious of or just ready to speak about. But most importantly, I looked forward to each session. I hadn't looked forward to anything for quite a while, and it was amazing just to have something nice to do for a change. But one of the most striking things that I recognized during my stay was the positive change taking place in the other clients around me. I watched broken people find hope, people beginning to speak with enthusiasm about the changes that they were going to make in their lives. It helped to strengthen my faith in the process and my own healing process. I had arrived broken. I felt hopeless, but I left with the courage and desire to improve my life. So I continued seeking help and fighting, and eventually I was properly diagnosed and treated. Now my life's fantastic. It's the opposite of what I had experienced in the past. I used to dread waking up each day. Now I don't want the days to end. I can't do everything I'd like to do in a day. There isn't enough time. I've recently been accepted to the Master of Social Work program at the University of Michigan. So I've decided to, in response to my past, learn to give back and to help those in need. And volunteering with Common Ground is part of giving back as well. And speaking here is part of that. So thank you for listening.
So Keith talked about two things that I want to explain. The Henry House that he was at it was free of charge because it is part of our contract with Oakland County Community Mental Health. And hi, Sheriff Bouchard. Glad you could join us. We'll have some questions and answers after this. But Henry is for adults, and like Keith said, it's a 2-week program, and it does have an art therapy program. But we also have some programs for youth, runaway and homeless youth, and transitional living programs for teens and youth up to 24 years old. And those are not funded through community mental health. So we have some underfunded programs that we are constantly writing grants and getting funding for. But I want to make that clear that the reason it was free to him was because of our contract with community mental health. And the crisis line and the access and the place where you can go at the county level where you can bring someone in crisis, those are all covered by community mental health. And I'm happy to report that we have just moved into a beautiful new state-of-the-art building on the county complex over at the 1200. It's the building 32E, and it is gorgeous. And it has taken, well, the Henry House hasn't moved quite yet. The people will be in the lower level, and the upper level is our crisis residential center, where people will bring anyone in crisis. If your neighbor's in crisis or someone that's a part of your life in crisis, that's where you bring them, and that's how we can help. Or they could pick up the phone. So there's many ways to reach out for help, but now they're all under one roof over at the county building, so that's very exciting for us because it's brought a lot of programs together. So our next impact area is providing support, communities of support. So there are a lot of things going on in this world that do not have a support system with them. Here we are in between Detroit, Pontiac, and Flint, and there's a lot of homicides going on, and there's not a lot of support for that. So Common Ground has a Survivors of Homicide support group, and people do come from all different areas to come and get support and feel the support of people that are going through the same thing. We also have a Survivors of Suicide group, and we have a teen girls group that is for girls that have been molested or raped in a middle school or high school setting, and that's not something that they can talk to other people about. So we provide these niches where it's needed. We provide groups for that. We also have a parenting group that meets regularly. So our next story is someone who has gone through the Survivors of Suicide group, and this is Terry Murchart. Terry?
Hi, everyone. I'd like to share the story of how I came to be involved with Common Ground. In March of 2008, my life was a scary mess. And that's because on February 8th that year, my 24-year-old undiagnosed bipolar son hung himself in our garage. I was at work, my husband called me with the news, and my world fell apart. We didn't know what to do. We tried to support one another, but we didn't have words. We didn't know what to say to one another. My husband has been disabled since 1999. His health got worse. My health, I deal with some chronic illnesses. My health got worse. My boss was totally unsupportive of the grief and stress I was going through. There were many days I began to think, well, maybe my son had the right idea and I should just join him. The things that you take for granted in life, like having any peace of mind, being able to eat, being able to get a good night's sleep, they just weren't possible. And I thought my life was never going to be the same. I remember the day after my son's death, we had gone to the funeral home in the morning to make the arrangements. And when I got home, I called my personal therapist. She had seen me through a lot of my son's teenage years to that current day, a lot of his acting out and giving me ideas how to set boundaries and things with him. And she said, I would be more than happy to do grief counseling with you, but suicide grief is something different, and I don't feel competent to go there with you. In about a month, you're going to need to talk to somebody. Everyone that you know is going to be over this. And I want you to look for a group called Survivors of Suicide. And she couldn't have spoken truer words. In a month, I would want to talk about my son. And whether it was friends or family, I would get shut down with, oh yeah, we miss Nate too. So I did. I went online. I found a website for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They list all the SOS groups in the country, and I found the closest one at Common Ground. I called. I actually spoke with Amelia's cousin, Sean Force. Sean lost her sister Maureen to suicide. And Sean asked me to come in and share the story of my son's death with her. And then she shared her loss of Maureen with me. By the end, we were both in tears and hugging. And Sean was that first glimpse of hope for me that you could survive something that devastating in your family. The SOS group has a couple different options, and the first one I chose is called the closed group. The people that attend the closed group make a commitment to show up every week for 8 weeks for 2 hours, and during that time we discuss very specific suicide topics, suicide grief topics, and because you're with the same group of people, you get to know each other well, and you're able to be a little more vulnerable with each other and not hold back your feelings. Some of the topics that we covered were how to learn new coping skills. My way of coping with stress had always been to read, and yet now I would pick up a book and read the same sentence over and over, and it wouldn't sink in and make any sense. So we talked about taking walks, bubble baths, eating some chocolate, talking to a friend, you know, going to a park, just different little ways to pamper yourself and get out of the rut of the grief. Some other topics that we covered were looking at the blessings of the suicide, which was real difficult, but they're there. You have to look for them. This opportunity for me to speak on Common Ground's behalf is one of the blessings. I am not a public speaker, and without my son's death, I'd never be sharing this story. Well, once the 8 weeks was over, I decided I wasn't ready to give up the group yet, so they have an open meeting the first and third Mondays of the month where anyone can come into the group. And there I found people that may have just experienced a loss on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and yet they found the courage to get up that morning and seek the help they needed. And that's when it dawned on me that we were all survivors. Common Ground gave us a safe place. They gave us trained facilitators, and they let us feel our most vulnerable and give us hope. I was able to get my daughter, my husband, my daughter-in-law involved in the group. Common Ground gave us the tools to start putting our lives back together, to save mine, really, and I don't say that lightly. I remember one of the first meetings I asked Sean, what do I tell my 3.5-year-old grandson about his dad's death? And Sean said, ask him if he's heard of a heart attack. I said, he's 3 years old. What's he know about a heart attack? And she says, oh, he's got ears. He's heard grown-ups talk. He's heard the word on TV. He's not going to know what it is. And here's what you're going to say to him. A heart attack is when someone's heart stops working right. And sometimes people die because of that. Well, Daddy had a brain attack, and Daddy's brain stopped working right, and Daddy died because of that. I shared it with Aiden at 3.5. Last, 2 springs ago, he actually found out his dad committed suicide. And he came to me and he goes, Grandma, thanks for telling me that. Now I get that there was something wrong with Daddy. And he's just beginning to understand the whole idea of mental illness and even asking questions about himself. What should I stay away from as I'm a grown-up? What kind of things should I look for that could trigger something like Daddy? So that's been a tremendous relief for me. My life is better. I can eat. I can sleep. I would even say I have peace of mind most times, except like all survivors, we all deal with the why. Because my boss couldn't deal with my illnesses that were triggered, he laid me off from my job a year after the suicide. And I tried, that was in December of 2009, I tried for 18 months to find a job in that horrible economic thing that the whole country was going through, and it wasn't going to happen. So I figured my illnesses were keeping me from a job, and I was going to apply for, not unemployment, but Social Security disability. And the judge did grant it to me retroactive to the day I was laid off, which was a true blessing, because in that first year that I was laid off, without health insurance for me and my husband, our income was $40,000, and our health bills that year were over $25,000. We lost a home, we lost a vehicle, and we had lived in that house for 27 years. So the money that the judge gave us the means to buy a new home. I'm now an East Sider. I don't live in Oakland County anymore, but I found once we were moved and unpacked and the stress was gone, I started to feel better. And I figured that I needed to find some way to get a better job so I can enjoy retirement instead of scrounging for every penny. And I looked at my last job, and what I really liked was maintaining the department websites on the company intranet. So I decided I'd like to become a web developer. And I'm in my second year at the University of Phoenix, and I've got a straight A average. Right now I'm taking the hardest class I've ever taken, called discrete mathematics for IT professionals, and my brain hurts taking this class. But so far I've got an A. I take my final next week. So there have been a lot of good things to come out of the tragedy. Whenever I have the opportunity to speak before a group, to share with other people about suicide awareness and options that are out there for people thinking about taking their life, or for people that are survivors, I'm more than happy to go and speak. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so that takes some courage. But Terry is a great example of what the name of this program is, Moving from Crisis to Hope. So these are some nice stories that we've been able to share with you. But the real, as Cheryl said, the real essence is that we are here to help. And as Tony said, you need to ask for help in order to get it. So we have one more story for you. And this one is going to be very interesting. This is a young man who I read about him in the newspaper, in my Lake Orion newspaper, and he actually quoted Common Ground, and he said that the reason he's doing what he's doing is because he went to get support from Common Ground, and the Common Ground counselor asked him, "What is it that makes you happy?" And I'm going to let him tell you what he has, but that's how we found him, and this is Anthony Grappito. And you might want to get your camera ready, Pat. Welcome, Anthony. Are you going to go in the middle, or are you going to do the mic?
I don't think I should be near the mic. I'll go in the middle.
Nice and loud. Hello. Is it mental? I think he needs to do his thing.
Yeah, I can talk here, but
Can we
there's not much
can we
I-
turn it so he can stand here? How about that?
Yeah, there's not much I can do after that.
Stand right there.
All right, perfect.
Right on the mic. Right on.
Now, like I was saying, during my high school career, I was slammed on my head, kind of putting me in this type of fog. It's really unexplainable. For those of you who know mental illnesses and things like that, it's kind of different for everyone. I unfortunately was affected and diagnosed with depression through Common Ground, which later sent me to Oakland Family Services. Now, my story starts right at the age of 16. When I was slammed on my head, I was kind of, like I said, put into this fog where I really didn't know what to do. My dream was to become a wrestler. I was going to college for it and everything. And next thing you know, bam, it's taken away in a day. My shoulders hurt so bad where I didn't really know what to do, and I didn't have health care to fix them, so I was kind of stuck without a physical therapist or anything like that, and 2 torn rotator cuffs that kept me up till pretty much the next day. I didn't sleep much. So as I went to Common Ground and things like that, they sent me towards a therapy session, and that really did help a lot. I kind of felt like this though when I was walking in there the first time. As the speaker presented earlier, he kind of felt that maybe he would have been judged or anything like that, and I felt the same way. You feel really trapped, you feel really bind, and that's what the props or metaphors for. As you can see here, I have 40 feet of chain wrapped around a straitjacket, and this is about as close as I can get to the feeling I went when I walked into that building and sat down for a therapy session. He introduced me to the cycle. He drew a circle on a piece of paper, and he basically said everything you cycle in this comes back around. What goes around comes around, and that's something that I believe entirely. He told me the more positive things that I put inside the cycle, the better the cycle would be, and that's how I had to go about things. And I went in there for about 7-8 months before I decided it was time for myself to move on. And I can't thank Common Ground enough for that. They really, without Common Ground, I don't think I'd be here today, just due to some things that happened in the past that I don't like to bring up. So let me kind of show you guys the metaphor here. A lot of people really forget this, and whether you have a mental illness or not, whether you're a happy person every day, it applies to everybody, and it's something that I think is really important to consider. Now, to a lot of people here, this looks nearly impossible to escape out of. Houdini didn't even do chains, and he was still stuck in a straitjacket. I think that the way you guys are looking at it, though, is a lot different than the way I'm looking at it. I'm going to do this step by step, and I'll show you guys how much easier it is really than you think. We're going to start. You take a deep breath. and let it out. And that loosens the slack so you can start working on the bigger picture. See, if you look at it as a whole, it's going to be a lot tougher. If you start working your way, and it's not easy, towards getting the problem solved, you're going to find that doing that, you're going to have to look back in life, and that's what the problem's telling you to do. But take it, for me, that's not the way. Look forward. And let the little things slide by. And it's going to get pretty painful towards the end there. But that means you're that much closer to escaping something that you thought could bind you down in the first place. Because as a magician, the only illusion I've ever seen is believing that something isn't possible. And that's, I think, what Common Ground really opens up when you do one of their sessions. Thanks.
So clearly it was magic. He told the guy magic, but I didn't want to let the cat out of the bag or the guy out of the coat. So Anthony's another great example of someone moving from crisis to hope. So at this point, we'd like to open it up to questions and answers, but because Sheriff Bouchard was kind enough to come out and join us, would you like to say a few words before we start the question and answer? You want to come and be a part? Come on up. This guy's funny. I was just at a session with him a couple weeks ago, and he was some good stuff. I don't know if you have a straitjacket, but Sheriff Bouchard.
Handcuffs.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to always come out when I can and support Common Ground and all the great things that they do. They probably don't even know how far back I go with Common Ground. I was actually in college planning on being a physician and was volunteering with Common Ground when I was 18 and 19 at some of the crisis spots, and found it so incredibly interesting and captivating that ultimately I started working with a guy by the name of Dr. Jerry Tobias, who was a counselor, a psychologist, and a professor, and changed my degree from pre-med to criminal justice pre-law, and ended up becoming a cop, and my parents still wondered what happened. But it was through that interaction where I saw certain people and certain groups can change lives and make a difference. And that's why I originally wanted to be a doctor, and I saw people doing it every day at Common Ground and elsewhere, and it changed my path. So it touches people in a lot of ways. It continues to touch people, as you've heard tonight. We certainly see people that are challenged in a variety of ways at the sheriff's office. We have one of the largest sheriff's offices in the country with almost 1,300 people. And on any given day, between around 1,300 to 1,500 people in our jail. And we've seen a large increase in challenges, mental health challenges. When I became the sheriff, we had about 8% of our population was on psychotropic meds related to mental health care. And typically today we're a little over 30%. So we become a de facto mental health center, which is not appropriate. People that have mental health challenges deserve better, I think. So we've been pushing very actively in the national and on the state level to get more funding to groups that deal with mental health in a positive, proactive way, like Common Ground and Community Mental Health and other partners, Easter Seals, that we have partnered with. I'm the head of government affairs for Major County Sheriffs of America, and we have a bill moving in the United States Senate to do just that. So we hope to get that going in the House side and to get more support to the mental health challenges that people face these days, because we see it play out on the streets, and I'm sure the chief sees the same thing here in Farmington Hills, great police chief that he is. I get a pass along called every 24 hours, all the major incidents that occur in the county, and sadly, but typically, without fail, in every 24-hour period or close to it, I see a suicide. And that's a challenge for us as a society and as a community. And without people that care, like Common Ground, and people that are here tonight, those numbers tragically would be worse. So thank you for what you do, and we're certainly pleased to be a part of anything we can to help.
Sure. Okay, so at this point, I would like to, first of all, thank SAFE for having us and Sarah for putting this together. I think this has been, it's been very nice for us to come out here and for all of you to come out here. And speaking of SAFE, why don't we bring up Ken Massey so he can talk about it.
Thank you very much, Reggie. First of all, Common Ground, thank you for coming out and doing this. Thanks to all the speakers and sharing your stories. Those were powerful stories. Farmington SAFE has actually been alluded to a couple of times here tonight, and as Sarah defined it, the acronym SAFE stands for Suicide Awareness for Everyone. I just wanted to take a quick opportunity to let you know what Farmington SAFE is, because we have a very active program in this community that was started in 2011 because on our, by the way, my name is Ken Massey. I'm a member of the City Council of Farmington Hills. I'm also a member of, one of the founding members of Farmington SAFE and its current chair. I wanted to let you know that it was started because in this community, our police department gives the City Council a report of all of our major incidents every week. As part of that report, because we had a number of interactions that involved mental health, we've asked for mental health interventions and that to be listed. And our police chief provides us with that. And on a particular weekly report, we saw 11 kids that had to end up having police intervention. 4 of them actually attempted to take their own lives. The others were threats, but all of them had escalated to a point where the police department became involved. None of those were completed suicides. They were, but there was rockets and red flares went off for a couple of members of the City Council. I always maintain this is a community that cares about its people. And if we're seeing this kind of activity, something must underlie that. We formed a little study group with the naive notion that we didn't have enough resources. And we had plenty of people, obviously, that needed help, but we didn't have the resources to offer to those people. We found out we did have the resources. Common Ground is one of those resources. What we didn't have was a community that was able to talk about it and able to get those people, because of what's been alluded to here this evening, that stigma of mental health. We don't just get sick from the neck down. We need to be able to have those conversations. We, as that study group, decided, okay, what we need is a task force for how we get that information out. The word went out, and we formed, at the time it was a very long name, Farmington Area Suicide Prevention Task Force, and that just doesn't roll off the tongue, so we came up with the idea of Farmington SAFE with the mantra, let's talk about it. This group is a very motivated group of volunteers. Cheryl is on the group, Sarah's part of the group. We have liaisons to our police and fire departments. Chief Nebus represents the police department. All the other members are very motivated citizens. They come from a variety of walks of life. The school districts are represented. We have representatives for our faith-based community and so forth, all with the idea that we can get out the message to people that we care and we can connect you up with resources if we can discuss it. And that's the motivation for Farmington SAFE. I also serve on the National League of Cities and Michigan Municipal League in various capacities. But at the NLC, I'm on the steering committee for public safety. I've been sharing with local electeds around the country and around the state of Michigan that you all have a problem. There are 38,000 completed suicides every year in this country. It's one every 13.7 minutes. And other communities don't even know it. I've had people say, oh, we don't have a problem in our community. Really? It's probably because you don't ask. You don't talk about it. Well, even if we knew what we had, what could we do? Well, We need to have active programs where those of us that have any type of leadership role can reach out and say, we need to have dialogue. We need to bring people together, let them know there are resources. We need programs like mental health first aid. We need to have programs like Crisis to Hope. We need to get that out to people so that they don't feel that they're alone. If we can reach out to people and we can get them that assistance, maybe we can stem the tide and help turn that around and see more people seeking help. And that's what we're trying to do. Well, the message has been received a little bit. Farmington Safe gets no money from the city. We don't use tax dollars. We actually have a memorial fund that provides all of the funding for it. And that message has been starting to get out there. And in Royal Oak, just this year, they've kicked off Royal Oak Safe. Yes, they followed the same model that we have. And yes, they're starting to make an impression as well. And we do it through community events like this one. And that's one of the reasons that Farmington Safe was very pleased to have the Crisis to Hope program brought into this community. And I would encourage each one of you to go out there, tell your neighbors, tell your friends. You came to this event, we learned a little bit more about what's going on. We know about Common Ground now. Give them the phone number. Make it okay to talk about it. Let's get this thing out of the darkness and get it in front of people so that we let people know that we care and we can help save lives. That's what this is all about. And after this all breaks up, if you don't have questions, there's going to be some refreshments out in the hallway. And welcome to the city. If you haven't been in our city hall, welcome to it. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, that wraps up our program. We'd like to collect those little cards so we can follow up with you and get your feedback. And we bring this out to communities. That's our goal, is to bring out to communities. So if there's anywhere you can think of to have us come and speak, we'd love to do that. Have a great night, and thank you so much for coming out on this, again, wintry night to spend time with us. So let's have some refreshments, and thank you, Safe, for having us. Have a great night.